Hey, welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host. And this is a podcast where we just want to ask the questions that we think that you would ask as it relates to Sunday's message. And as we do so, we hope that it helps you grow in your life and your faith. With that being said, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the podcasts that are coming out. Not only that, hit the like button, because when you do so, it helps us help other people. And if you ever have a question about Sunday's content or about Overtime, you can submit those to overtime@npaustin.com, and we will be sure to get to those in future podcasts. So with that being said, here's a quick recap of Sunday, and then we're going to jump into our conversation today.
Today, we are equally so and more isolated and more lonely than ever before. It says our new report suggests that 36% of all Americans feel serious loneliness. Loneliness and social isolation are twice as harmful to physical and mental health as obesity. Okay, here's the science, here's what it says about loneliness. And then the question becomes, what does God have to say about this? In the beginning, God. And in the beginning, when God created the world, and he looked at it all, and he went, wow, that's so good. Good meaning complete, in form, in function, in potential. The very next thing, it says, then the Lord said, it is not good for man to be alone. You're designed to be seen. You're designed to be heard. You're designed to be valued. You're designed to be in connection. That's where you're going to find maximum freedom in life. And he says, you are designed to be connected.
Okay, so Buck, we started off with a question and rally this past Sunday. We do a rally with our whole Sunday morning team, production and music and all that stuff.
That's good.
And the question I wanted to ask you, because I was really curious, but the question was like, is there a time in your life with you and a couple of other people, because we're talking about like community and connection and front porches, where you look back on your life or this moment and you say, man, good times.
Yeah.
And these ended up being like the time in the rally. It was like the time that I ran from the cops and never got caught.
Yeah.
Such a good time with my buddies, and it was we set this island on fire, and like it was like
crazy
those
times.
kind of moments. I wonder
that
you can share publicly.
There's been really bad moments, but they were on the front end of a bad moment in my life where I was like, it's fun. And in those moments, I remember calling my buddies doing terrible things and going, man, this is awesome. Good times, man. You need to get, down here or whatever.
Yeah.
And those were some of like my greatest regrets.
Some of the darker times in life.
Those would be like, But I think when you said that immediately, I thought of Las Vegas. And I was thinking of, this is a buddy of mine called me when I was at, I think it was like Sam's football game. So it's several years, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. Yeah. And Sam's football game, and he's like, hey, do you like UFC? And I was like, yeah, I love UFC. And he was like, hey, my wife and I were going to Vegas, and we're going to watch UFC. It was like 2-something, 220 or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, and we have floor tickets, and I have 2 extra if you and Jill would like to come. And I'm like, I looked at Jill we're trying to pay attention to Sam on the football field, and I'm like, babe, you're not going to believe this.
Oh,
and gosh. So we end up going with them and some other friends, and we're on the floor, and I got a selfie with Bruce Buffer, and who announces like, it's time.
Yeah.
And I was giving fist bumps to the fighters when they were walking out.
Oh,
I was
man.
that close, and then we were on the floor, and we experienced the whole thing.
I remember you got to see Joe Rogan up close too, right?
Rogan. Joe Rogan was there. DC was there.
Yeah.
I mean, just all the names in kind of the UFC arena, if you will.
Yeah.
And they were live and they were real, and it was like and I remember thinking to myself, like I felt there was a heightened sense of feeling like, ooh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And I look back and, I talk about even my buddy that I was there with. I was like, man, that's good times.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
That was a lot more. That was a lot more legal than some of the stories that were shared in our green room on Sunday. So,
yes.
lots of grace in the green room, I guess.
Yeah. Those are good.
Yep.
Those are fun to think about.
Okay, so let's jump in. So we talked about, we're kicking off a new series called Front Porch that we're doing last Sunday and this coming Sunday. Mm-hmm. really talking about a super important just idea that we need community, that we need connection, that we are designed this way, and culture. And I don't want to always point our fingers at culture, and culture's bad and this and that, but culture has led society's kind of shifted in a direction that leads us feeling more lonely. So a little bit of recap, but also let's like take it a little bit of a layer further. Can you just define front porch more deeply, talk about what it means practically a little bit?
Yeah, and I'll just tag on a little bit, just if you're listening or watching, just to give you a little bit more context. And what I was saying on Sunday is that, 100 years ago, the front porch was like the place to be. It was a place to like hang out, to have conversations, do life, because, the outhouse is on the back porch, the trash heap is on the back, or there was no back porch in the backyard, all that kind of stuff. And so like the backyard was not the place to be. The front was the place to be, and that's where you connected relationally. And then over the last 100 years, which is amazing, like as you're saying, culture's tried to connect us. Like it's all these different things to go like, here's, technology to connect us, social media to connect us, all these different things. But in their attempt to connect us, like all the research, and I was sharing, ad nauseum on Sunday, says we're more isolated and lonely than ever before. Like we're just less known than ever before. And so the whole series is like, how do we get back to the front porch? What can you and I do to take these steps to get back to the front porch? And so the front porch, in light of that, is really like that place, as we were alluding to on Sunday, was like the place to be known, the place to be seen, the place to be heard. It's the place where you can have small talk and talk about the Texas Longhorns because that's the only thing to talk about, or talk about Mr. Gaddy's Pizza and why I love the ranch and why you think that's ridiculous and that's the worst
I'm like
pizza.
Mr. Gaddy, like in our message prep, I'm like Mr. Gaddy's like Pint House, like
I know
something different. Come on,
man.
Yeah,
like how could I like? But it's like those fun things, and to talk about, which the first question you asked me, looking back, oh, good times, But it's also the time to go like, hey, here's life. Here's the emotional storms of life. Here's my dad passed away. My mom passed away. I lost my job. My wife and I are fighting like no tomorrow. I'm losing hope. My son is like, feels totally lost to me. Or, I'm a brand new dad or brand new mom, and I feel so like ill-equipped. I just have no idea what to do. It's the place to... it's the place to be real. And, I wrote down a couple things in terms of, it's as I was saying, it's the small things, but the big things. And it's ultimately the front porch, if I had to define it, it's the place to build relational trust with a group of people that you're ultimately known and that you're not alone. It's the place to give people access to your soul. And that's to go, this is who I am. And it's the place to ultimately experience intimacy. Intimacy is all of me, all the good, all the bad, and you love me.
Yeah.
I have that connection with you. That's the front porch. And that's my desire. I think all of us, to be on the front porch, all the research, again, points to the fact you're most fulfilled, you're happiest in life. You feel most exhilarated. You feel more hope in life when you're on the front porch.
Yeah.
And when you step off it, that's when you begin to feel like, you start believing things that aren't true. You start losing hope. You start feeling more alone and more isolated. And there's a whole kind of landslide of negativity that goes with that.
Well, and it makes sense too, because you think about social media, we are more connected than ever, but social media can only get you so far. And the percentages are kind of helpful. Like, what percentage of you is fully known? And in social media, it might be 10%, 20%, 30%, but you need those front porch type environments, and not, a lot of us don't have front porches, so it's not going to actually be a front porch, but you need those kind of spaces and environments intentionally built into your life so that you can experience the 70%, the 80% known, and get up to that place where, man, there are those 100% relationships where they know the good, the bad, and the ugly, and they're okay with it.
100%. Yeah, and social media, I mean, we all know this. It's so much about surface stuff.
Yeah.
Here's my best picture. Here's the coolest
here's my highlight
opportunity.
reel.
Yeah, here's my highlight reel. Or here's my like negativity. Here's what I hate. Here's what I'm going to, blow up on you, And that's not who you are as well. I mean, then you get labeled with all these things, and we're just dealing like on the fringe.
Yeah.
And so,
or it's when people post like really difficult things that they're processing in life, you kind of get this feeling like, hey, this isn't the place for that.
Right.
Like, you need like someone to talk to.
Yeah. Immediately, that's where my thoughts go.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is not the forum. You should. I feel like you're lonely now. I feel like you have no one to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, as you were saying that, it reminds me, there's a book I'm reading with my boys, and a book that some of our small groups, our men's groups, read, and it's called Becoming a King. And in that, as we were just talking about that, I was thinking about a section where this guy who's writing the book, he was talking about a part of a story. And he said, hey, I went on this hunting trip. I was like with these guys and like we were drinking beer, like talking about life. And then we started talking about some deeper things of life. And he was like, I felt so alive. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like he was like, it's the last thing I had time to do was go on this trip. But it was the thing my soul needed deeply.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, it was so refreshing. And he was telling his wife about this. And his wife named Cherry, she says to this guy named Morgan, she says, Morgan, you don't seem to have any peers. You have older men from whom you seek out advice and relationship, and younger men to offer up to, but you really don't seem to spend time with other men your age. And I can make an observation. You've lost your smile, and I think those two things are connected. In other words, it's like, hey, you got some of this advice, like here's what you need to do, and you're like telling these, but you have no one who knows you.
Yeah. And
you've lost your smile. And I feel like, you've walked away from the front porch. You haven't intentionally prioritized the front porch. That's as much as I can say to, that's what we need, the front porch.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many resources and books. One that we've gone through, a lot of our teams here at Northpoint have gone through is called The Power of Moments. Mm-hmm. And it studies like what constitutes a moment in our life. Mm-hmm. And they did a whole study with Disneyland where they, asked people to rate their experience on a scale of 1 to 10 throughout, the whole day at I think it was Disney World actually.
Yeah.
And they asked them, rate it, and then they averaged the numbers, and it was 6.5 was like how their experience was. Mm-hmm. But then they asked them, how would you rate your entire experience? Not the average, just how would you rate it? And most of them said an 8. And they came to the conclusion that like in life and experientially, we don't really look at like the average. We look at a few set of particular moments. Mm-hmm. And they break down like what constitutes moments in life. And there were 4 different types. And one of the types was moments of connection. Mm-hmm. That these are the moments that we crave, that we long for. And it's that sitting around the campfire,
right,
sitting on the front porch. It's some of those just most organic, like just moments in life where you feel so connected to another individual. And I've always loved that because it just, there's even like science and studies, they said like you can make it feel like you live longer if you add more of these moments up together in your life.
Yeah.
Whereas like, and that's why we say like blink and like a month goes by.
Yeah.
If we're not intentionally building in these moments of connection, well, of course a month goes by. We're not experiencing any moments in life. And I love the Mark Batterson quote that I talk about a lot. It's like time is measured in minutes, but life is measured in moments. Mm-hmm. And we need these moments. We need like what you're talking about, the smile on our faces. We need these front porch type experiences.
I love that. As you were talking, a buddy of mine that we both know, I had one of those moments like 4 weeks ago, and it was it was like part 1 of the series Wind in Your Sails, where I was showing the picture of me at the beach, and I'm like, I have all this wind in my sails. Yeah. But the reality was,
you're showing the picture of your feet at the beach.
Oh yeah.
For somebody who wasn't there, they're like, what? You were showing a picture of you at the beach?
Yeah, a picture of my feet, because I was looking out over the ocean, and it was such a cool picture. Yeah. And I was showing that picture to tell everyone, like, man, I feel like I have so much wind in my sails. Well, what happened is just a few hours before that, Saturday night, Jill and I just had this big knockdown blow up and this fight, and I'm like, the timing was so terrible because for like months we've had so much wind in our relational wind in our marriage, and then Saturday night it like got all sucked out right before I'm stepping in to teach about putting wind in your sails. Yeah.
And well, it's funny too because you'd written the message, and you're like, "Here's all this wind in my sails," I know. And then you're like ready to deliver it, and then that happens.
Yeah, we just got so sideways, and so long story. And back to the front porch is like the following week, I'm sitting down with one of my buddies, and he's a guy that I have a front porch relationship with, and he looked at me, and we were just talking, and I was like, here's what's going on, and I'm just frustrated, and I can't believe Jill, and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And he said, Buck, your spouse is not your problem. Your spouse reveals your problem in you. Mm-hmm. And I went, that's the truth I've known. That's the truth I've even given advice. I had lost sight of that. And it was the turning point for me to go back to Jill, to own my piece of the past, to begin to say like, hey, here's the deal. Yeah. And it was those moments that I think back, like we've connected, 50 times in the last, me and this particular guy in the last 4 weeks since that conversation. But that's what I remember. that moment that he was able to reflect that, because we'd built trust for years and years and years. We've had this front porch relationship, and it's been intentional, and he was able to say that. And I'm like, oh, that's why I love that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Those are the moments we crave right there. Those kind of front porch. Now, going to the back porch, I want to talk about a little bit about, it seems like there's this gravitational pull in culture, in society, towards the back porch, you know. And now I know we're taking this metaphor like as far as we can go with it.
Sure.
But this gravitational pull towards like, let me isolate, let me you know, just push it under the rug. I'm fine. I'm good. Why is there that draw mentally for us in terms of, you know, back porch life and what back porch life looks like? Yeah,
I think it's part of that natural thing. I think there's a inclination in us, and we've got things in us that are healthy and unhealthy, and this would be one of those things that it can be both. I think there are times, depending on your personality, that you need to like withdraw to be refreshed, be re-energized. That makes a lot of sense. But I think we take that too far, and maybe, you know, that time that we walked in, you know, outdoors by ourselves, or that time we sat on that mountain, like for you, I know you love the mountains, you sat on that rock and it was so refreshing, and it's like, oh, well then that's true for all aspects of life. And so then we kind of extrapolate that and begin to project that and say, that's gonna, you know, my dad just passed away, or there's a big relational issue, or whatever it may be, tragedy, or in our grieving process. That's one of the biggest dangers of grief, is in grief we have a tendency to isolate. When I do memorials and things of that nature, you know, one of my pieces of kind of pastoral advice is, please don't do that. Like, I understand that's the temptation. I understand you've gotten relief there in other places, but when it comes to grief, when it comes to certain areas, don't project that on this. And so I think there's a part of us that wants to do it. But, you know, I think we, again, just going back to the research, even if you're not a God follower, even if you're, you know, would say there is no God, I just say the universe or whatever may be, is that all the science, all the research points to the fact that you're not designed to be isolated. You're designed to be connected. And so the back porch, we've got to be really careful about this, because the back porch can feel like we're connected. So we may have more relationships than ever. We may be more known than ever. And I described this a little bit on Sunday when I was like, as a pastor, you know, I know more people know me. I go to restaurants, I go to there's not a time I go out that I'm not bumping into somebody who's like, hey, Buck, or, oh, that's our pastor, or, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I'm more known than ever, but I can be more isolated and lonely than ever. So you can be on the back porch, have all these cool surroundings, the pool, the fire pit, the technology. But yet you can sit there and go, I have everything that I want, but no one knows me. That's the back porch. The back porch is like, I spend time kind of on the social media conversations, the friends conversations. That's as deep as I go. Like, you know, I never really talk about what's really going on in my marriage, what's really going on in my relationships, what's really going on behind closed doors. Like, there's no space for me to be me. There's no space for me to be like unfiltered. There's no space for me to be human. And so I have all the luxuries of life. I have all the prosperity of life. I have all these friends. I have all this, you know, all the things that I've strived for my whole life, but no one knows the real me.
Yeah.
And that's the back porch, to where it's like, ooh, I don't want you there. And if you're a God follower, if you're not a God follower, if you're a scientist and, you know, you just stick to the pure objective research, there's nothing beyond that, you know, wherever you land on that whole continuum, all the evidence would say, man, that is a landslide of negativity, physically, emotionally, psychologically, will happen on the back porch.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, where it becomes really humbling and tangible is when we can all kind of think about, I think not all of us, but a lot of us can think about a relationship we have. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a family member or a friend, and we wish they had front porch. They've been on the back porch their whole life or a long time, and we wish they would have had something like this, something like what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think even you and I, as we've talked about our dads and we've talked about family relationships, I mean, we long for that. I think every son, every daughter longs for that from their parents. You know, the ability for a parent to lean in and have those deeper, like, conversations. But a lot of times it's just like, hey, how are you doing? I'm fine. Everything's good, you know. And then in certainly the church world or religious world, it's like, oh, God is good all the time. I'm like, all right, that's true, but how about you? You know, what about you? Because that's what we're trying to get at. And we just spend so much time on the back porch. And, you know, in a culture, it's just hard. I mean, it's hard to go, it takes time to build that trust. And so our culture kind of promotes it too. It's like, hey, you know, every social media picture is fine. Every vacation is cool. Every marriage looks happy. So it's like, I have to like keep up. So it pushes us back to the back porch, and we stay back there, and everything's fine, everything's good, everything's awesome, everything's, God is good. And I'm like, that's a really lonely, isolated place to be.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that there are different personality types that would experience the front porch differently? I mean, there's, like, for me particularly, like, I'm a pretty mega introvert, like, I love, like, some people, loneliness and isolation and silence and solitude is difficult for them. That comes very naturally for me. Like, I enjoy those moments.
Right.
Now, granted, I also know that if I go too long without moments of connection, I start to get weird. I need that like brotherhood and those kind of things too. So there's definitely both in all of us a little bit, but how would you break this down with different like personality types and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think there is a danger in what I'm communicating, and I do want to be as clear as I can, is to say, to take away from Sunday's message to go, hey, if you're an introvert, you're going, I just don't like that because that just doesn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
And that's most likely on me. Because I didn't present well or communicate well. And Sunday's message was all about something foundational, meaning a human thing. This is all human beings. Think about a house.
Yeah.
All great houses have this really good foundation, but how you build on the foundation, you can build, multi-story house, a glass house, all these different variations. So there's lots of different expressions of houses, but every house, solid house, has a foundation. Well, the foundation is the beginning, and what I was trying to communicate on Sunday was far more about, like, from science, from research, from God's perspective, your Heavenly Father, like, He designed you from the foundational piece. All of us are designed to be connected. And if you tell yourself, if you take maybe the housing piece, maybe the paint or, the windows, how you place them, I think that's more of our personalities.
Yeah.
If you begin to project that on your foundation, I think it gets really confusing. And now all of a sudden you're going, well, because I feel or desire or get energy through isolation, therefore that's foundational, that's core to who I am. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to, again, isolate myself, which is one of the things is to go, oh no, that's what you've built on the foundation. But the foundation is from science, from God, from everything. You're designed to be connected.
Yeah.
You're most fulfilled, you're most joy, most happy, you live longest if you're connected. So then you build on that to go, okay, but what's your personality? Well, some, like, people wouldn't guess this about me and, potentially about you, like if they see you on stage or if you're on stage, every week, they would go, oh, you're built to be around people. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh man, I get really de-energized. So now that's more like the layer on top of the foundation that I need to know that about myself to go, I need to get away. I need to go home and, just spend time in the living room or in the backyard or whatever.
Sit on the rocks.
Yeah. That gives you energy. That gives you clarity of thought. That gives you a time to, be replenished.
Yeah.
And that's in addition to your foundation.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important just to delineate those.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about Enneagram numbers and how, if this is foundational and we all need community, different Enneagram numbers are going to kind of gravitate towards the back porch in different ways. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about a 5 would be probably, I think, the most introverted. Mm-hmm. I'm not an Enneagram expert, but after going through a number of things, going like, okay, yeah, the 5s are probably the most introverted, the most like isolated, they're thinkers, like that kind of thing. Their gravitational pull towards the back porch is probably pure isolation. Like, I'm just not going to people, like best neighbor is no neighbor, that kind of mentality. And then you think about the 7 is on the opposite end, and they're just the people party, but they're going to gravitate towards the back porch in more of a like surface level relationship way. They're going to have a ton of friends, and they're going to have nobody who really knows them.
Right.
And so I guess in a lot of ways, we gravitate towards and away from the front porch depending on our disposition, personality, wiring in life. Mm-hmm. But we all need it at the end of the day, and we all want that in life.
Yeah. And that's where, at least it works in my mind. Maybe it doesn't work as a good illustration, but that's where I'm saying, like, hey, how the house is built and the colors of the house and the painting of the house and the design of the house and the architecture of the house, all of us have different flavors of that, and we need to really know what we are, and that's the Enneagram. But the foundation of the house is you were designed, you were created, from the very foundations of a human fabric from your soul, like to be connected.
Yeah.
And if that's not there, if the intentionality around prioritizing the front porch isn't there, then there's going to be a significant void in your life.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you take this and apply it to creating like a we're kind of jumping topics a little bit, but more related to the family, like the front porch family. How do you create and prioritize this kind of mentality, culture, just in the families that we build today?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is you have to model it. I think this has got to be, I think this is in part to why we really struggle as a culture today, because it wasn't modeled for us in the previous generation. And again, my experience, I'm just going to speak experientially. I don't, no, I do know the stats. I mean, the research I was looking at last week, the older generation of folks, and again, if you're listening or watching, do the research on your own. This is heartbreaking research, is they're extraordinarily lonely. Well, I think in part to why they're so lonely, that previous generation, that's our parents, that's our grandparents, and why oftentimes you're like, you don't have any friends, or you like have one friend or something like this, is because the lack of intentionality in the nuclear family around prioritizing the front porch in their lives. And so then you just get old, you get busy, you raise kids, you go to work, you want to retire, you build your home, do whatever, and then you're like, okay, there's just no one around me.
Yeah.
And I think we've grown up in that, and we have a chance to kind of break that cycle. So I think part of it is just we have to intentionally, as parents, model this to our kids, which part of intentionally prioritizing the front porch is you've got to put it on your calendars. And, my wiring, that works well, but I think across the board, if you're not intentionally putting it on some sort of calendar to go like, hey, this is when my wife and I connect, to have these more intentional conversations. Something that Jill and I do in premarital counseling with all the couples, we just say you have to have your weekly meeting. Mm-hmm. If you're going to get on the same page, perhaps talk about some of those deeper moments. Like, you can't create that moment, but you can create the environment for the moment to have a probability of happening.
Yeah.
So this is the place to go, get on the same page. You have to get, in the same room.
Yep.
So have your intentional times that you as a couple, hey, we're going to do this on a weekly basis or every other week or whatever it may be.
And two things there really quick. I want to hit on something you said, just to define. You said nuclear family, which I don't know if everybody's familiar with.
Sure.
But nuclear family, there's a book called Take Back Your Family by Jefferson Bethke, and he talks about this pretty extensively. And just to define what that is, he says it's a family system where each individual is focused on their own ambitions, not about the collective benefit. Mm-hmm. And so, that's the family that kind of came about sort of in the 50s and 60s and has progressed to where it is today, where our culture is headed. The reason, so many even nursing homes in America versus that idea of a nursing home in other parts of the world is crazy, mm-hmm. because we have this nuclear family ideal where I'm going to get, it's all about my ambition, my life, my dreams, and it's kind of separate from mm-hmm. the family in a lot of ways, mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to define that. And then also I would just say putting it on your calendar, this is probably the simplest why behind why we do community groups at Northpoint, mm-hmm. and why probably a lot of churches do some sort of group, or, they call it something different, but it's groups, because we know we need this. Mm-hmm. We know we gravitationally lean away from it, mm-hmm. but we need it, so let's put it on our calendars. And so groups do that. Yeah. Groups is this time every week it's going to happen. There's accountability. Mm-hmm. I'm a part of this group. We see each other. If I'm not here for 2 weeks, you're going, hey, where were you? What's going on? Mm-hmm. It's it's the very most it's one of the most practical, just intentional things we can do to do this and put it on our calendar is just to be in a group. Yeah,
because otherwise we just and I mean, I am so guilty of this. So as I share this, but otherwise there's the rivers of culture, the rivers of busyness, the streams of what's the next thing? I got to get this done. Honey-do list, whatever it is.
Yep.
And it's I just get caught up in those, and now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks since I've connected relationally with my sons, or connected with Jill, or connected intentionally on the front porch with that group of individuals. And now it's 2 months, 3 months. Now it's 2 or 3 years. Now it's 4. And it turns into that so fast. So intentionality is how you break that cycle.
Yeah.
And I found this with my sons. I can't tell you how many times I'm oh man, I so want to connect with their hearts, and I want to have this great relationship. Well, I have to do something. I have to be intentional. And so this is why, we have our book clubs, or we have our lunch, and it's on our calendars. I'm hey, let me show you how to use the calendar. Here's your phone. I'm going to send you this calendar invite, so you have because this allows us to go, this is our intentional time we go to dinner. This is our intentional time we have breakfast. This is our intentional time we're going to read this book. And again, I'm just creating a front porch opportunity for my boys and for Jill and I to have those moments, to go deeper in our relationship. Because in the busyness of life, every now and then you get a chance. Every now and then it's oh, there was something. But it's this creates the environment to be most intentional, to be able to build that intimacy, to build that trust. And there's a quote I love by Joseph Chilton Pierce, and it's one of the most convicting quotes. It's a quote that has led to a lot of like, oh, I feel lots of conviction in my personal life, but it's also been a great motivator. And in parenting, he says, what we are teaches a child far more than what we say, so we must be what we want our children to become. If we want our children to be on the front porch and experience that relational connection, we have to be that for them. They have to see, like the guy I was talking about who reflected your spouse is not your problem, reveals your problem in you. Mm-hmm. They know this guy. They talk, that's my best friend. They're like, oh, that's your best friend. And dad hangs out with him all the time. And they have, like, dad and him will go get a beer, especially like when things aren't going well, or like it seems like there's a refreshment that happens that relational. That's where Jill and I are part of different communities and different, front porch opportunities. And they see that consistent place and they ask about it. And that's why for them, when we talk, like them being in small groups, they're like, the why behind that is in part because that's what mom and dad do. Like that's what's been modeled. Like they need that in their life, so I need that in my life. Yeah. And I think it's just intentionality. That's why I said on Sunday, you have to intentionally, prioritize the front porch opportunities or the front porch in your life, and you really do, especially in our culture that's so busy. And it not only impacts your life but your kids' lives. Yeah,
and it's funny you say that too in terms of generational differences. It's just I've run into a lot of I don't know, people my age I knew in high school, 10 years ago when we were graduating, and I just see this like thing in them that so desires to go back and have the kind of more natural friendships that happen in high school, the kind of tribes, even the cliques, things like that. Yeah. It's like something in them. You can just see they're lonely, and something in them is
life
like,
gets busy.
I wish I could go back and have that thing. Because that's like the very thing we desire the most. And
100%.
And I would just say, like our good friend Wes Young, he has this phrase that he says a lot: do it by design, not by default. Mm-hmm. The default is to not do this at all. Yeah, you have to design it into your life because our culture and society is structured in such a way that it's going to default you towards isolation. Mm-hmm. You have to design this into your life, and that's putting it on the calendar, making a habit of it, and modeling that to your kids.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I'm going to skip ahead. We're running low on time here.
Sure.
How can we share who we really are? This is like I'm sitting on the front porch, metaphorically speaking, or maybe it's an actual front porch. It's probably going to be on the back porch for all of us. Sure. That's what we have, right?
Yeah, that's what we have.
How can we take the step to begin to be known? How can we share who we are? How can we know it's safe to do so?
Yeah, I would just say it's really important to understand it takes time. A lot of times from a Sunday's message, or even, there are things we may say flippantly, and I've got to own those things that may lead to an outcome of someone believing that, hey, tomorrow morning when I wake up, I can have this deep, intimate, relationship and be known. Yep. And I would love that. I would love if somebody has the secret sauce, if somebody has a secret ingredient. Sometimes tragedies or traumas or like the most intense situations can like bond people together in that space that way. But I think for the rest of us, for 99.9% of us, I think it just takes time. Trust takes time to build. And in my mind, I think about it relationally like it's like the foyer living room kitchen. In the foyer, you and I are like, hey, my name's Buck, and you're like Jeremy, and we're getting to know one another. Well, you got to have those consistent times in your life where it's like, hey, do you like the Longhorns? Hey, you're not a big sports guy. Hey, you're a mountain guy. And you're like, oh, you're a golf guy. And, oh, you're a pastor. And da-da. And so that's all on the kind of the foyer is we're getting to know, like, who are you? And then we move into the living room and we're building trust. And that's like, oh, I'm married with 5 kids. And you're like, oh, tell me about that. And that's a lot of kids. And you're like, hey, and I just had a son. His name's Grace. And I'm like, oh, brand new newborn. Like, tell me about that. And how long have you been married? And tell me about you and Ashley. And now all of a sudden, we're starting to form more trust. And it takes time. And that could be like weeks or months into our relationship. Now we're moving into the living room. Yeah. And eventually, we want to get to the kitchen. And the kitchen is where we've built enough trust where I'm like, Jeremy, this is really hard to say, but man, I'm not sure about Jill and I. Like, I feel so dang lonely on the other side of my wife. I've never told anyone that. Mm-hmm. Or, man, when it comes to my sons, like, gosh, I feel like a terrible father. I have no idea what to do. Or when it comes to God, I mean, the truth is I just never pray. The truth is I have no idea how to read the Bible. I mean, I know Buck keeps talking about reading the Bible, and, the truth is I don't even know where to begin. I've never told anyone that. Everybody thinks it's those kind of things. Or, like, I've kind of lost hope. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, no one knows how much the bottle means to me. Mm-hmm. And I've never shared that. Now, that's kitchen kind of conversations.
Or even here's what my parents said to me, or here's what my boss, or here's something. Yeah.
And a lot of times it begets. In other words, the more you share it, the more we build the trust. So trust is foundational. But the more you share and you're vulnerable, well, then it begets vulnerability in me. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden I'm like, you shared about something like with your mom or your dad or, in a marriage. And I'm like, well, if you're going to go there, then, man, me too. Mm-hmm. I felt that too. And that happens in the living room, moving to the kitchen. And once you get to those kitchen conversations, now you're showing up. And my point is, I wish I could give you the silver bullet to go, this is how you are known. But it's trust. Trust takes time. It's foundational. And you got to move from the foyer to the living room, ultimately to the kitchen to have those. Man, I'm known. Jeremy totally knows who I am, and he loves me, and he's for me, and he spurs me on, and he celebrates with me in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, the way you're describing it is, I think, so relevant. So many people who are listening and what they want and desire. And I was just thinking, man, to somebody who's watching or listening, and they're going, man, I so want that. I don't even know how to get there. And community groups, awesome. What's a step? But what does it look like to get there? I think a great next step is just open your hands and say, God, would you just bring these kind of people in my life? Would you bring these opportunities for these kind of relationships? And God, I'm kind of at my ends. God, I need you to show up here in that I just need people.
Yeah.
And, God wants us to be connected. He desires for us to experience community with one another. And oftentimes it is just going, hey, God, would you just provide this? And I would look back on my life and recognize places when I wasn't doing that, and he still brought people.
Yeah.
And I wasn't open-handed. I was more probably trying to isolate and be like, I'm good. And he still brought people to go around and say, hey, how you doing? How you doing really? Those kind of things.
100%.
And I just think he does. I mean, I don't know how God's mind works, but there's providence in there somewhere that is he brings people together in a significant way.
It's really cool. And even if you're not a God follower, I would just say, Jill and I had a couple that was part of our small group. And they were atheist, and they just said, hey, we just want a connection. And we knew that we felt lonely. We were new to Austin. We just wanted a connection. We didn't know anybody. And as a church, it was cool because we were providing opportunities for people in the community to get involved, to get connected. And they had heard about it through some neighbors, like, hey, here's a group of people that get together on like a Thursday night. Yeah. And they were like, can we come? And that's how they got connected. And it's a really cool story. And eventually they put their trust in Christ. But I would even say, if you're not a God follower, is also, I mean, this is so pragmatic, but it's like at the end of the day, you just take that step, take a risk. It's like, it's a trust fall moment. And that's why as a church, we've tried to create so many different opportunities for connection. There's just not one sliver. I think we've got 40 different opportunities to go, we can't create that moment for you. We can't guarantee you're going to be known, but we can create the greatest environment for that to be probable in your life. Mm-hmm. And so, as much as it sounds pragmatic, like just do it. Yeah. But it really is just do it. On the other side of it, it's great reward.
Yep, for sure. With that, I think we should go ahead and wrap up and encourage anybody who's listening who perhaps was here on Sunday or watched online and perhaps they scanned the QR code, filled out the form, just to follow through on that. I mean, perhaps God is going to provide somebody in your life, whether you're a follower of Christ or not, and but perhaps there's somebody who is perhaps scanning that QR code on the other side and they're desiring the same thing you desire, and the group can be a great opportunity to discover that. So be sure to follow up as you get followed up with, and so that you can jump into a community group and experience that.
Yeah, and if you're listening, go to mpaustin.com/front porch, and that'll allow you to provide your information, and that information just allows us to follow up with you. And then you'll also get a response to that, which is a link that has like those 40 different opportunities, different areas to get involved and connected. It's one of the greatest decisions you'll make in your life.
Yep. Awesome. Buck, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And we will hopefully experience some more front porch moments in this podcast next week.
Why not?
And we're going to be wrapping up the series this coming Sunday. So we'll see everybody in person or online.
Sounds great. Thanks, man.